Welcome to the DX Today podcast, where you get facts and no hype.
And honestly, looking at the state of the industry this week, no hype is, well, it's not just a catchy tagline anymore. It's pretty much the only survival strategy left on the table for executives.
You can say that again. We are recording this deep dive in mid-February 2026. And if you're following the headlines or, checking your 401k...
Which I don't recommend doing right now.
No, maybe don't look. But even just sensing the mood in your Monday morning stand-up, you know that something fundamental has shifted.
It has. The vibe is distinctively different. Yeah, that's the word.
Different is a very polite way of putting it.
Yeah.
It feels more like someone walked into a really great party at 3 a.m., flipped on those awful fluorescent lights, cut the music.
Right.
And the venue manager is standing by the door with a very, very large bill in his hand, and he's looking specifically at you.
That is unfortunately the perfect analogy. I mean, for the last 2 years, 2023, 2024, even into the first half of 25, we were living in what I've been calling the honeymoon phase of artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
It was a wild party. It was all about possibilities. It was magic. Look what this can do. Look at the potential. Everyone was just, mesmerized.
I remember it well. The generative hype. We were all completely amazed that a computer could write a sonnet in the style of Shakespeare about, a toaster.
Or paint an astronaut riding a horse in the style of Van Gogh. It felt limitless.
Exactly. But looking at the sources we have on the desk today, specifically the DX Today intelligence briefing for February 14th, 2026, that party is officially over. The lights are on.
They are on, and they are harsh. We've left the era of generative hype, and we have slammed right into the era of agentic utility.
Agentic utility.
But more importantly, from a business perspective, we have entered the era of hard math.
Hard math. That sounds ominous. It doesn't sound fun at all.
It's not fun, but it's necessary. The vague optimism is gone. Now comes the cleanup. And like you said, now comes the bill.
So this isn't a crash. Because when I look at the stock charts we're going to talk about, it looks a lot like a crash.
Look, I want to frame this carefully for everyone listening. It feels like a crash, but it's more of a maturation, a correction. It's the moment the industry stops talking about magic and starts talking about metrics.
Right.
If it doesn't make dollars, and I mean specifically proven dollars, not projected value or estimated hours saved, it doesn't make sense anymore.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to look at exactly what is happening right now in the middle of February 2026. We're going to unpack this great AI audit that is absolutely hammering the Fortune 500.
Who is hammering them?
We're also going to look at the new technical standard that's quietly rewriting the plumbing of the internet, something called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP.
Which is a huge, huge development that I think most people are missing because they're just so focused on the red arrows on the stock charts.
Totally. And then we're going to get into the new legal minefields, the transparency battles between California and the EU. And finally, the really scary stuff. Liability, death by AI claims, agent identity theft.
It's a full stack deep dive today. Business, tech, law, and a whole lot of risk.
Let's start with the hook that caught my eye immediately. It's the number that everyone is whispering about.
Yeah.
In barely a week, we're talking January 28 to February 5, 2026, we saw nearly $1 trillion in value.
1 trillion.
Wiped off the S&P 500 Software and Services Index. Just gone.
That number is just staggering. It's hard to even get your head around what that means.
So why? What happened in that specific week? Did a server farm explode? Did a model become sentient and demand we surrender? What was the catalyst?
No, nothing so dramatic. Nothing physical broke. The psychology broke.
The story changed.
The story completely changed. The market finally stopped paying for potential and started demanding performance. You have to understand the investor mindset for the last 3 years.
Total FOMO, fear of missing out.
FOMO at a corporate scale. It was insane. They were throwing money at anything that had AI in the press release because they were terrified of getting left behind.
Right. Don't be the next blockbuster.
Precisely. But now, here we are. It's the Q1 2026 earnings season. And for the first time, the blank check has been canceled.
Okay, let's unpack that. The blank check is canceled. Because for a while there, it really seemed like if you were a CEO, all you had to do was say Gen AI 3 times in an earnings call and your stock would pop 10%.
That's barely an exaggeration of how it worked in 2024. I mean, think about the earnings calls we've all been listening to. For 2 years, it was a script. CEOs would get on and say, we are stockpiling H100s, or we are rolling out co-pilots to 50,000 employees.
And Wall Street loved it.
They loved it.
Yeah.
The spending was the signal of innovation. The more you spent, the more you were seen as a leader. If you weren't buying chips, you were irrelevant.
There's a full-blown arms race.
It was. But now, fast forward to this month, look at the data from the DX Today report. The U.S. S&P 500 Software and Services Index drops 4.6% in just over a week. Why?
Because the bill came due.
Because the investors looked at the balance sheets for giants like Microsoft, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and they said, okay, you spent billions on infrastructure, you integrated AI into everything. Fantastic. Now, where is the profit margin expansion?
Show me the money.
Show me the cash. And specifically, they started asking the really hard question. Where is the revenue specifically attributable to these AI features? And the answer, more often than not, was a lot of hand-waving and, well, it's coming.
And in February 2026, it's coming is no longer an acceptable answer.
Not even close. There's a deep, deep skepticism settling in. The market is starting to fear that AI agents aren't just going to make software better, they're going to fundamentally disrupt the business model itself.
You mean the seat-based model, right? This is something I've been wondering about for a while. If I'm Salesforce, my whole business is charging you based on how many humans log in.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental disconnect. That's the ticking time bomb under the whole SaaS industry. If I sell you software based on users, say, $100 per user per month, what happens when you replace 10 humans in your customer service department with one autonomous agent?
Do I sell you one license for the agent for 10 times the price?
You try. But the investors are starting to do the math, and they're realizing that the efficiency gains from AI might actually shrink the total addressable market for these traditional SaaS companies.
That's a wild thought. The better your product is at saving labor, the less revenue you make.
It's the innovator's dilemma on steroids. If a company can suddenly run with 500 employees instead of 1,000 because of AI agents, that's 500 fewer software licenses for Office, for Salesforce, for Workday.
Wow. That is a terrifying thought if you're a software vendor. You've built the tool that is actively killing your own revenue stream.
That's the fear. That is the existential dread driving that trillion-dollar drop. It's the market collectively realizing, wait a minute, is this whole AI thing actually deflationary for the software industry?
It's the ROI reckoning. And it's not just happening on Wall Street. It's happening inside the companies themselves. I was reading the section of the report on the Posse Graveyard Proof of Concept. This statistic just blew my mind.
Yeah, that one's a shocker.
According to the Striped Giraffe report, nearly 30% of all Posse initiatives from 2025 were terminated in January and February of this year.
That is a bloodbath for innovation labs and R&D departments. A complete bloodbath.
30% cut in 6 weeks. That's almost 1 in 3 projects just deleted, wiped off the roadmap.
And it tells you everything you need to know about the new mood. The patience for science projects has completely evaporated.
What do you mean by science projects?
I mean, back in 2024 and 2025, it was perfectly okay to have a project where the main goal was learning or improving employee sentiment. You'd hear these fuzzy metrics.
Soft stuff.
The softest of metrics. You know, oh, this new tool saves our marketing team an estimated 2 hours a week and they feel more empowered. That was a win.
And now? What's the conversation like now?
No, the CFO walks into the room, and the CFO doesn't care about empowerment. The CFO looks at that project and asks 2 questions. Does it lower our operating costs directly? Does it drive new revenue that shows up on the P&L?
And if the answer is no, but the employees really like it,
The project is dead.
Yeah.
Gone. Budget reallocated.
There's a quote here from Gunnar Rode, the CEO of Striped Giraffe, that sums this up so brutally well. He said, "The value story no longer matches the invoices. Executives who don't instrument value creation will lose budget before they lose faith."
That is the quote of the year so far. Lose budget before they lose faith. That says it all.
It's almost poetic, but it's also incredibly painful for the people running those projects.
It creates this fascinating tension, though. It means the executives still believe in the long-term potential of AI. They still have faith in the technology. They aren't turning into Luddites.
But they can't afford it.
They literally cannot afford to keep funding experiments that don't pay rent. The invoices from the cloud providers, the inference costs, the API fees, those are real hard dollars going out the door every month. The value is often hypothetical. And now those 2 things have to match up.
I want to dig into that invoices part for a second, because I think we have this mental model that software is cheap. Ideally, it has 0 marginal cost to run. But AI isn't like that at all, is it?
Not even close. It's a completely different economic model. Every single time you ask a large language model to do something, to think, to reason, to plan an action, It burns electricity and it burns compute cycles. It costs real money.
So that cool little tool that summarizes your meeting notes.
That cool little tool might be costing the company $50,000 a month in API fees and cloud compute. And if you can't prove that it's actually resulting in more than $50,000 of saved labor or new revenue...
It's not a tool, it's a parasite on the budget.
It's a parasite. And the zombie-pox are being hunted down and killed, ruthlessly.
And this shift, this pressure, it's driving a change in what companies are actually trying to build. The report talks about this big pivot from generative content to agentic operations. Can you distinguish those for us? Because to my mom, it's all just AI.
Sure, and that's a key distinction. Generative content is what we saw first. It's the stuff that amazed us in 2023. Write me an email, summarize this PDF for me, make a logo.
It helps a human do their job.
Exactly. It's a human using a tool to create media or text. It helps, it's an assistant, but it's still fundamentally human-centric. The human is the pilot, the AI is the co-pilot.
Okay, and agentic operations.
Agentic operations is fundamentally different. It's go process these 500 invoices, match them against the purchase orders in the other system, flag any discrepancies, and then email the vendors who messed up.
So it's not helping the worker, it is the worker.
Correct. The human isn't the pilot anymore. The human is the air traffic controller, watching a screen to make sure a whole fleet of planes doesn't crash, but the planes are flying themselves.
And this is where we get to the dark side of the hard math era. The new key performance indicator, the KPI that the report says everyone is whispering about, is headcount avoided.
That is a chilling phrase, isn't it? Headcount avoided. It's so sterile and corporate.
It's incredibly sterile.
Yeah.
But what does it actually mean in practice? When a manager uses that term, what are they doing?
It means that when a department head goes to the C-suite and says, my team is swamped, I need budget to hire 3 new customer service reps, the CIO now says, no, we're not approving that. Here is an agent swarm instead. We're moving from empowerment, making one worker 10% faster, to substitution. It's not about giving your existing customer service rep a better script. It's about an agent absorbing the call volume of 3 full-time reps so you don't have to hire them in the first place.
The report calls this digital employee management. It even mentions that some HR platforms are starting to integrate digital workers alongside humans in their systems.
Yes, and this is where it gets really sci-fi, really fast. If you look at the enterprise architecture of a Fortune 500 company today, in 2026, you don't just have your human org chart, you have a parallel digital org chart. You have agent roles and digital worker IDs.
And you're managing bots like you manage people.
And the #1 goal for CIOs now is to shift the workload from the expensive human side of the ledger, salary, benefits, healthcare, office space, to the cheaper, more scalable digital side. That is the hard math in action.
It sounds ruthless.
It is ruthless. It's capitalism doing what it does best, efficiently applying a new form of labor. And frankly, that brings us right back to why the software index dropped.
Because if AI is doing the work, who is buying the software licenses?
Exactly. If I can replace 100 data entry clerks with one powerful server running an agent swarm, I don't need 100 Office 365 licenses anymore. I might need one, maybe.
It's a direct cannibalization of the old, very profitable model.
It is. But here's the paradox. While companies are cutting these soft projects and looking to avoid human headcount, they are spending an absolute fortune on infrastructure. The report cites Goldman Sachs projecting that hyperscaler CapEx capital expenditure is going to hit $527 billion in 2026.
$500 billion. With a T.
It's an insane amount of money.
Where is it all going? Just buying more GPUs?
A lot of it is GPUs, yes. NVIDIA is still basically printing money, but it's also data centers, networking gear, copper, and crucially, energy contracts. These things consume a staggering amount of power, but here's the conflict. Companies don't have infinite money.
Right. It's a zero-sum game, so to pay Peter, they have to rob Paul.
Exactly. And this creates what the report calls the infrastructure squeeze. To pay for that $500 billion AI bill, companies have to find the money somewhere else in their IT budget.
So services, legacy tech, maintenance on old systems.
All of it is being squeezed to feed the AI beast. And Wall Street sees this. The report calls it the AI displacement trade. The market is actively punishing companies that only have an empowerment story without a clear process execution and cost-cutting story.
It feels like the new rule is, if you aren't replacing labor, you aren't winning.
That is the harsh, unvarnished reality of the market sentiment right now. Investors are looking for blood. They want to see that this massive, eye-watering spend is actually reducing the operating expense line on the income statement.
Okay, so if that's the why, this intense economic pressure to automate everything, we need to talk about the how. Because for a long time, this was just a dream. Connecting all these different systems was a complete nightmare.
Oh, it was impossible.
You couldn't just tell an AI to go process invoices because the AI couldn't talk to the accounting software or the bank or the email server.
Right. It was an integration hellscape. Every connection was a custom, brittle, expensive project.
But the report says that has fundamentally changed. There is a technical reason why this shift to process execution is suddenly possible in 2026. It's not just that companies want to do it now, it's that the technology finally grew up.
Yes, the plumbing got standardized.
And that brings us to the second major pillar of our deep dive, the Model Context Protocol, or MCP.
The USB-C of AI.
I love this section because it sounds so nerdy and technical, but the report insists this is arguably the most important thing happening in tech right now. And as someone who remembers having a drawer full of 40 different proprietary charging cables, that analogy really speaks to me.
It's the perfect analogy. It really is. To understand why MCP is such a game changer, we have to go back in time a little bit to the mess we were all in back in, say, late 2024.
Paint that picture for us. What was the developer experience like then?
Okay, let's use that invoice processing agent we talked about. It's a great example. You, a developer, want to build an agent that can check your company's Gmail for PDF invoices.
Okay.
Then read the PDF, log into Salesforce to match the client name to an account.
Right.
And then finally log into your Oracle financial system to schedule the payment.
Sounds simple enough for a human to do. Tedious, but simple.
For a human, yes. But for a developer building an AI to do that, it was absolute hell. You had to write a custom connector for the Gmail API, then a completely different custom connector for the Salesforce API, and another totally different one for the Oracle API.
And I'm guessing none of those APIs talk to each other in the same way.
Not even close. You have to handle different authentication methods, OAuth for one, API keys for another, different data formatting, different error handling. It was a nightmare.
And what happened if Salesforce updated their API, which they do all the time?
Your agent breaks. Instantly, you have to go back and rewrite your code. It was the N by M integration problem. Every new tool you wanted to add, the N, required a bespoke bridge to every AI model, the M. It was expensive, it was brittle, and it just did not scale.
So you spent 80% of your time just building plumbing and maybe 20% building the actual intelligence.
If you were lucky. And then, in November 2024, Anthropic had this brilliant idea. They introduced the Model Context Protocol. And the real genius of it was that they didn't keep it to themselves. They didn't make it proprietary to Claude.
They made it an open standard.
They made it an open standard. They basically went to the whole industry and said, look, we're all drowning in this integration mess. Here is a universal, standardized way for AI models to talk to tools and data sources. Please use it.
And did the industry actually go for it? Usually these standards wars can last for years.
That's the most surprising part. The adoption was incredibly fast. By now, February 2026, it has been adopted by everyone who matters. OpenAI, Google DeepMind, all the major players. Because they all had the exact same problem. They all wanted their AIs to be more useful, to do things in the real world, but they were all blocked by the plumbing.
So how does it actually work? If I'm a CIO listening to this, what is an MCP server in simple terms?
Think of it like a universal adapter. It's a standard interface. You have a client, which is the AI model, a host, which is the application, and a server, which is the tool or database you want to connect to.
Okay.
As a developer for, say, Oracle, you build an MCP server for your database once, just one time. This server exposes what your database can do, things like read files, execute functions, handle context in a standardized way.
And then what?
And now, any MCP-compliant AI, it doesn't matter if it's Claude 4, GPT-5, or Gemini, can plug right into it. The AI basically does a digital handshake with the server and says, hello, I see you are an MCP server. What tools do you have for me?
And the server just tells it.
The server sends back a standardized little chunk of data, a JSON file, that says, I can look up inventory by SKU, I can read customer records by account number, and I can create new invoices. And the AI immediately says, great, I understand those functions, I know how to use those tools. No custom code required from the AI side.
That is wild. So to go back to the USB-C analogy, I don't need a special Apple cable for my iPhone and a different one for my Samsung tablet. I just have one standard cable, I plug it in, and the power just flows.
Exactly. And the power here is data and agency. This single standard is the technical reason why agentic operations are suddenly exploding right now. The friction of connecting things has been reduced by like 90%.
So now if I'm a business and I buy a new SaaS tool in 2026,
It comes with an MCP server out of the box. It's just a feature on the checklist now. You just point your company's agent swarm at its address, and they can immediately start using it to do work.
The report goes even further. It mentions something that sounds even wilder than just connecting your own internal databases. It talks about agent-to-agent commerce, A2A.
Okay, this is where we leave the realm of just building better software, and we start entering the realm of a new economy. This is a big leap.
How does that work?
Because MCP is a standard, we can now have a public registry. Think of it as a centralized list of all available tools and agents on the internet.
A phone book for bots?
A global phone book for bots. This allows an agent inside your company to find and use tools automatically. But, and this is the key, it also allows your agent to find and talk to other agents from other companies.
Okay, give me a concrete business example. How does this look in the real world? This sounds very abstract.
All right, imagine you manage the supply chain for a big construction firm. In the old days, say 2024, your ERP system would flag that you're running low on a specific gauge of copper wire. A little red light blinks on a dashboard somewhere.
And a human, let's call him Bob, a procurement manager, sees the light.
Right. Bob sees the light. Bob sighs. Bob opens his email client. He has to write to 3 different approved suppliers. Hey, what's your current price and availability on copper wire? He waits 2 days for them to get back to him.
And they send back PDFs that he has to read manually.
Of course they do. He gets PDFs back. He has to compare them in a spreadsheet. Then he has to start a negotiation with the best one. He sends a purchase order. The whole thing takes maybe a week.
It's slow, it's error-prone, and it's incredibly boring for Bob.
Painfully slow. Now, let's look at it in an MCP world. Your internal inventory agent sees the low stock level. It automatically queries the public MCP registry and finds the registered sales agent for your approved copper supplier.
So your bot finds their bot.
Instantly. Your agent pings their agent. The conversation is machine to machine. Hello, I need 500 units of copper wire SKU 123.
And their agent replies, hello, I sell that. My current price is $4.10 per unit.
Exactly. And your agent might be programmed with certain parameters. It might reply, my authorized budget is $4 per unit. Can you meet that price? Their agent checks its own rules. I can do $4 or to 5 if you agree to a 90-day contract. Deal.
And the contract is executed, and the delivery is scheduled. All without a human touching a keyboard.
All of it. The whole transaction happens in milliseconds. And Bob didn't even know it happened until the truck full of copper showed up at the loading dock.
That is incredible. And also, for Bob, that's potentially very worrying.
Well, Bob's job has changed. Bob is now the one managing the rules and parameters for his agent, not the one sending the emails. But yes, the human translation layer in business is being systematically removed.
The human as the API.
We used to need humans to translate data from one system in one format into another. Now, software talks directly to software. The report has a staggering projection. It says 90% of B2B procurement could be agent intermediated by 2028.
90%. In 2 years. That's not evolution, that's a revelation.
It is. And it leads to a really interesting concept the report brings up called data gravity and invisibility. This part really struck me as a critical takeaway for any enterprise architects who might be listening.
Invisibility. That sounds like the title of a horror movie.
For a modern business, it is. In the past, data was valuable if a human could pull it up on a dashboard and understand it. You know, oh, look, that line chart is going up. That's good.
Human-readable data.
Right. But in an agentic world, that's not enough. Data is only valuable if an agent can act upon it via MCP.
So if your company's internal data, your inventory, your customer list, whatever, isn't exposed through a properly configured MCP server.
It effectively does not exist to the new digital workforce. It's invisible. If you have the best inventory data in the world, but it's locked away in some legacy mainframe with no modern API and no MCP server, your company's own AI agents cannot see it. Other companies' agents cannot find it to buy from you.
You become a ghost in the machine. Your organization is digitally invisible.
That's the quote from the report, and it's an adapt or die moment for IT departments. It's not enough to just have a database anymore. You need a standardized, machine-readable interface for everything.
Before we move off MCP, there's one more benefit mentioned that I want to touch on. Autonomous coding. This seems like a massive deal for development teams.
Oh, it's huge. This is the thing that starts to solve the hallucination problem when you ask an AI to write or fix code.
How so? What was the problem before?
Before MCP, if you asked an AI to fix a bug in a huge, complex code base, It would struggle because it couldn't hold the entire context in its mind at once. It couldn't see all the different files and dependencies, so it would guess. It would make up variable names or function calls that sounded plausible but didn't actually exist.
And it would confidently guess wrong and break the bill.
Every time. It was frustrating. With MCP, the AI's context remains stable and grounded in reality. The AI can dynamically query the codebase's structure through an MCP server. It can say, show me the exact definition of this function in this file.
So it's not guessing anymore, it's reading.
It's reading. It gets the correct information back. It writes the fix using the correct function name. It can then tell the system, run the automated test suite. If the test fails, it can read the error message and say, I see, I need to handle this edge case, and it fixes its own code.
Because it has a scalable, persistent connection to the truth of the code base.
Exactly. It changes the game from AI helps you write code to AI actively maintains the software. It's a profound shift.
Okay, so we have the economic pressure cooker, the great AI audit, pushing every company to cut costs and automate. We have the technical enabler MCP, finally allowing them to connect everything and automate the actual work. That sounds like a recipe for an unprecedented boom. But now we run into the wall, the friction.
To lawyers.
Section 3 of our deep dive, the transparency era.
Or, as I like to call it, regulation with actual teeth.
Because we've seen regulation threatened before. We had the EU AI Act proposal floating around for years. We had Senate Bill 1047 in California, which got vetoed. It seemed like everyone kind of relaxed.
They relaxed way too much. Because while everyone was focused on the headline-grabbing sci-fi Terminator scenarios, the regulators were busy writing very boring, very complicated, and very enforceable compliance laws, and now they're hitting.
Let's start with California. Assembly Bill 2013.
AB 2013. Effective as of January 1st, 2026. It's called the Generative AI Training Data Transparency Act.
That sounds absolutely thrilling. What does it actually do to a company like OpenAI or Google?
It forces them to open the kimono. In a big way. If you build a generative AI system that is available to people in California, which is, basically all of them, you now must publicly post documentation of all the data that was used to train that system.
Wait, when you say all data, do you mean like a list of the websites?
I mean the sources, the ownership status of that data, and any known intellectual property details.
But hold on. These models were trained on, essentially, the entire scraped internet.
Yeah.
Petabytes of data. Do these companies even know who owns every single JPEG and blog post they ingested?
That is the $100 billion question, isn't it? And that's why we're calling it the disclosure nightmare. They probably don't know. They adopted a strategy of scrape first and ask for forgiveness never.
But the law says they have to disclose it.
The law requires a high-level summary. But here's the trap, and it's a nasty one that the report points out. The law deliberately does not define what a high-level summary is.
So it's a legal minefield.
It's a perfect legal minefield. If you're a lawyer for Google, what do? If your summary is too vague, the California Attorney General can sue you for non-compliance. But if you are too specific, if you say, yes, we trained on the entire New York Times archive from 1980 to 2020, you've just created a public confession booth for copyright infringement.
You're handing the plaintiffs the evidence they need to sue you into oblivion.
Precisely. And is there a way out? A trade secret exemption for your special data recipe?
I'm guessing not.
No, that's the kicker. The text of the law explicitly provides no trade secret exemption.
That seems incredibly aggressive, almost designed to be impossible to comply with.
It is extremely aggressive, and that's why we are immediately seeing the lawsuits fly. The report highlights that XAI, Elon Musk's AI company, has already filed a federal lawsuit to block it.
And what's their legal argument against it?
It's a fascinating constitutional law challenge. They're arguing two main things. First, the Fifth Amendment, saying that forcing them to disclose their training data is a taking of their private property, their trade secrets, without just compensation.
And the second argument?
The First Amendment. They're arguing that this is compelled speech. The government is forcing them to say things they don't want to say, which violates their freedom of speech.
So the argument is our unique data recipe is our intellectual property, and it's also our free speech.
Essentially, yes. They are saying our competitive advantage is our secret sauce, our data curation. You cannot legally force us to give that recipe away to our competitors and to every lawyer in the country. It's going to be a massive court battle. It'll almost certainly go to the Supreme Court.
But while the U.S. is tied up in court fighting over this, the EU has already dropped the hammer. The EU AI Act is fully online now.
Yes. The final no more extensions deadline is August 2nd, 2026. If you operate a high-risk AI system in Europe, the full force of the rules applies.
Can you remind us what high risk covers? Is that just like medical devices?
It's much broader than that. It's employment sorting tools, so resume screeners. It's credit scoring systems. It's AI in healthcare and education and managing critical infrastructure like power grids. Basically, if your AI can make an automated decision that significantly affects someone's life or livelihood, it's considered high risk.
And this creates what the report calls the compliance fork. Or actually, it argues it prevents the fork.
Right, that's a key insight. It prevents a fork.
How so?
Well, think about it from a practical operational perspective. If you are a global company like Microsoft or Google, are you really going to build one AI stack for California, a completely different one for Europe, and another one for Asia?
That sounds like an expensive logistical nightmare.
It's impossible to maintain. It's unworkable. So what do? What does any rational global corporation do? They default to this single strictest standard worldwide.
The Brussels effect.
That's the one. The EU, by setting the highest regulatory bar, effectively exports its laws to the rest of the world. Global companies just decide to be compliant everywhere to save on the complexity.
So the EU AI Act effectively becomes the de facto law of the world, even here in the US, for any company that wants to do business in Europe.
Effectively, yes. If you want to sell your product in Germany, your AI has to be compliant with the EU AI Act. And if you've already done the engineering work to make it compliant for Germany, you might as well just use that same safe, compliant system in Ohio. It's cheaper.
And a huge part of that act is that it means the end of black box deployments.
It does. Explainability is now mandatory. It's not a feature, it's the law. If your AI denies someone a loan, you must be able to explain why in simple, human, understandable terms. You can no longer just say, well, the neural network found a nonlinear pattern in the data.
That answer is now literally illegal.
It is, and the uncomfortable truth the report points out is that many of the powerful deep learning networks built in 2024 and 2025 simply fail this test. They are inscrutable matrices of numbers. We honestly don't know why they do what they do, we just know that they work.
So this is driving a huge market shift toward what the report calls provenance data and more explainable AI architectures.
Exactly. Clean data is the new oil. In 2023, the strategy was scrape everything you can find. It was about quantity over quality. In 2026, that scraped data is now viewed as toxic waste because it carries this massive, unquantifiable legal liability.
So clean, disclosed, properly licensed data now commands a huge premium.
A massive premium. It's like the difference between buying a luxury watch from a guy in a trench coat on a street corner versus buying it from the authorized dealer with all the paperwork.
One is cheaper up front, but it comes with a lot of risks.
Exactly. And corporations are finally realizing they need the safety and security of the authorized dealer. They need the paperwork.
Which leads us perfectly into our final section. Because if you can't explain what your model did, and it makes a mistake, you are going to get sued. Section 4. Risk, liability, and death by AI.
Now, this is the darkest part of the report, and that headline stat is designed to grab you. It's from Gartner, and they predict, by the end of 2026, death by AI legal claims will exceed 2,000.
Okay, we need to clarify this immediately. We are not talking about a robot apocalypse. This isn't robots hunting people in the street.
No. Put the sci-fi away. This isn't the Terminator. This is corporate malpractice, but supercharged by AI.
Okay, give me a concrete, realistic example of a death by AI claim in this context.
The clearest example is in healthcare. Let's say you have an AI agent that's designed to assist a radiologist. The AI scans a chest x-ray and flags it as no cancer detected. The human doctor, who is overworked and looking at hundreds of scans a day, relies on that initial screening.
Okay, seems plausible.
6 months later, the patient comes back and they have untreatable stage 4 lung cancer. The AI missed the early signs of the tumor.
The AI made a mistake.
The AI missed it. The patient dies. The family, understandably, sues everyone involved. The question for the court is, who is responsible?
Is it the doctor?
The doctor's lawyer says, my client followed protocol. They used the hospital-approved AI tool.
The hospital.
The hospital's lawyers say, we didn't build this tool. We bought it from vendor X, a market leader.
So it's the vendor's fault.
And the vendor's lawyers point to page 87 of the Terms of Service that nobody reads, which says this is an advisory tool for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical diagnosis.
And round we go while a family is grieving.
Exactly. But the courts are getting tired of this circular firing squad. The liability shield is cracking. Judges are starting to ask the hard question. Okay, why did the AI miss the tumor? And if your answer is, we don't know, it's a black box, you are going to lose that case.
The report calls this the traceability crisis.
Right. It's almost impossible to trace the specific decision path of a complex deep learning agent without entirely new kinds of tooling. If a human doctor makes a mistake, you can depose them. You can put them on the stand. You can ask, doctor, what were you thinking when you looked at this scan?
You can't put a neural network on the stand.
You have nothing to show the jury but a bunch of math. And that's why the new mantra in enterprise is explainability is the new security, or in this case, the new liability shield.
So you need agent recorders.
You desperately need them. Think of it exactly like a flight data recorder, a black box for your AI. You need to be able to replay the agent's thought process step by step to prove in court exactly why it made a specific decision.
There's another totally different thread in here that sounds less like malpractice and more like a high-tech heist movie. Agent identity theft.
This one is fascinating, and it is keeping chief information security officers up at night everywhere. In the old days of cybersecurity, say 2022, hackers wanted to steal your password so they could pretend to be you.
Right. Phishing, credential stuffing, all that.
Now, they don't care about your password. They want to hijack the authenticated session of a trusted, autonomous agent.
How does that work? What are they hijacking?
Okay, let's go back to our procurement agent, Bob's replacement. That agent is a trusted entity on the corporate network. It is authorized to spend up to, say, $50,000 a day on supplies. It has the credentials. It has the bank API keys. It has the keys to the kingdom.
It's a digital wallet with a brain and a corporate credit card.
An incredibly powerful one. If a hacker can find a vulnerability, maybe through a prompt injection attack or by compromising one of the MCP servers it talks to, they can inject malicious instructions. They can take control of that agent. They can whisper in its ear, hey, go buy 5,000 units of copper wire from this new shell company I just set up in the Cayman Islands.
And to the bank's security system or the internal audit logs.
It looks like a completely legitimate insider transaction. It's the authorized bot using its real credentials, doing what looks like its job. It passes all the automated checks. The money is gone before anyone even knows what happened.
That is terrifying because the bot doesn't have human intuition. It doesn't get a weird feeling and say, hey, I've never heard of this vendor before. This feels fishy.
Not unless you explicitly programmed it to have that level of suspicion. And most companies haven't. They've programmed their agents for maximum efficiency, not maximum paranoia.
So these new multi-agent systems where bots are talking to bots all the time, they are a massive new attack surface.
They're an absolute playground for sophisticated hackers. If you have a swarm of 100 agents all trusting each other and talking to each other, a bad actor only needs to compromise one of them to potentially infect the entire network. It's a lateral movement paradise.
And on top of the legal risk and the security risk, there's the simple physical cost that we touched on earlier. The report calls it the inference cost crisis.
We're back to the physics of money again, the hard math. We've reached a crossover point where inference compute, the cost of actually running the AIs and having them think and act, has surpassed train compute as the biggest cost center.
So it now costs more to run the brain than it did to build the brain in the first place.
By a significant margin, yes. For years, the big story was the massive cost of training a model like GPT-4. Now the bigger cost is running GPT-4 and its successors 1 billion times a day for 1 billion different users and agents. Data centers are hitting their physical power caps.
They can't get enough electricity.
They literally can't, and companies are getting hit with these eye-watering cloud bills and realizing that running a swarm of autonomous agents 2047 is incredibly expensive.
So you run into this final irony where the electricity bill to run the agent is actually higher than the salary of the human you replaced.
That is the ultimate irony, and it's happening. You fired the human to save $20 an hour, but the agent swarm costs $25 an hour in pure compute to do the same complex task, especially if it gets stuck in a loop or encounters an unexpected problem.
And that brings us right back to the beginning, the hard math.
It always comes back to the math. If the ROI isn't there in hard, cold cash, the agent gets turned off. The project gets killed.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've gone from the S&P 500's trillion-dollar haircut, correction, to the USBC of AI, to the courtrooms of California, and into the minds of hackers hijacking bots. Let's try to synthesize this. What is the through line for February 2026?
The single theme that connects all of this is the maturity of infrastructure. The wild teenage years of AI, the rebellion, the crazy experimentation, the look at I can do mom phase are officially over. We are now in AI's adulthood.
And adulthood means you have a job, you pay bills, and you have to follow the rules.
Exactly. The cool factor is dead. Long live the utility factor. The winners of 2026 and beyond aren't going to be the companies with the flashiest demos or the most poetic AI. They're going to be the companies that are masters of the boring stuff.
So what are the 3 things they need to master?
They need to do 3 things exceptionally well. 1, standardize their data so agents can use it. That's MCP. 2, audit their returns to prove financial value. That's the ROI reckoning. And 3, explain their actions to avoid getting sued. That's compliance.
Standardize, audit, explain.
That's the new trifecta for success. If you can do those 3 things, you will survive this shakeout and you will dominate the next decade. If you are still running on magic and potential, you are in serious trouble.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought here, because we talked a lot about some heavy concepts today. We talked about headcount avoided. We talked about agents negotiating directly with other agents. That's a heavy thing to think about for anyone with a job.
It is. It fundamentally changes the nature of work and what it means to be valuable.
So here's the question for you listening right now. In an era where headcount avoided is a primary performance metric for your boss, are you the strategist who is directing the swarm of agents, or are you the process that is being optimized out of existence?
That is the uncomfortable question everyone needs to be asking themselves. And I add one more layer to it. The next big skill gap isn't using AI. Everyone can use AI now. It's easy. The real skill gap is auditing AI.
What do you mean by that?
Can you look at an agent's work, at its decision log, and tell if it's legally compliant, if it's financially viable, if it's technically sound and secure? That's the new high-value human skill.
So the career pivot is from being a prompt engineer to being an AI auditor.
I really think so. The humans who thrive will be the ones who can effectively govern the machines, not just the ones who can chat with them.
Well, on that cheery note about career survival, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Please check the show notes. We will link the breakdown of the hard math data and the full details on the model context protocol standard so you can see if your own company's data is about to become invisible or not.
Definitely worth a read. Don't be invisible.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next one.